Hello, welcome everyone. It is March 11th, 2025. This is the 9 a.m. board briefing meeting. Please let the record reflect that we have Commissioners Jordan, Waldrop, and Kearns in the conference room. Commissioners CUNY and French are out today, and we are going to lead off with a presentation from Mike Burgess, update from Olympia. Take it away, Mike.
Thank you. Good morning, commissioners. Should be pretty quick, like last week. Just going to run through our bill list. I think I told you last week, not a lot new is being introduced, and we're at a point in session where everything is out on the House and Senate floors. We'll be there until Wednesday at 5 o'clock, and then we'll transition back to committee hearings for House bills that have moved over to the Senate and vice versa. So I'll update you on those here in a minute. The House been going pretty late into the evening most nights. Worked Saturday also, whereas the Senate, interestingly, is adjourning each day by about 4 o'clock. That's not totally abnormal. It's been that way kind of the last 3 or 4 years for sure. But by contrast, some late nights if you're a House of Representative member right now, doing some pretty controversial bills too, is why those things take longer, and a lot of amendments offered by the minority party. So we've got a few bills actually on the list that are getting caught up in some of that I'll talk about. But the first bill on the list is the local government planning bill, the GMA bill that we'd had some issues with, but it was amended when it left the House to the point now where we should be neutral on that bill. I still have opposed there. I need to change that to neutral. But there was language added that took care of most of the issues, and it has moved over to the Senate, has a hearing on the 13th. So just need to monitor that bill and make sure it stays in the current form it's in now. The next bill, 1218, that was one of the first bills we talked about this year. It's been on our list the whole time that we're opposed to. That's the competency evaluation bill. It is on the House floor calendar, hasn't moved yet, but that's the one that would drive some costs down to you. That wouldn't be good. The next bill, 1258, that's the 911 funding bill. It did advance to the floor calendar last night. So the bills will be in rules and then they get bumped up to the floor calendar. So that means it could be voted on today or tomorrow. I've heard there might be some more amendment language to that bill. I didn't check yet this morning to see if there is anything available, but it could be voted on at any time, and it would need to pass the floor by tomorrow at 5. Senate or House Bill 1700, that's the comp plans delay bill that's very similar to 5558 that's lower on the list. They're not true companions because there is a little bit different language when they were introduced. I don't know though that 1700 will move because the other one moved, but it is on the second reading calendar. So just wait and see if that does move out. But like I said, I don't know that it will because the other one did. 1813 was this is the behavioral health bill, or the reprocurement bill that Justin briefed you on probably a month ago now. It had kind of been stalled in the House Rules Committee, but it did come out of rules yesterday. So that's good. This one would give you some additional flexibility. Next on the list is the law enforcement aviation bill. That did move out of the House on the 8th. That's good. So wait for a hearing over on the Senate side for that bill. 5060, the law enforcement personnel bill. This is Senator Holy's bill, the grant program to hire new law enforcement officials. The bill hasn't moved, but this is going to be caught up in the budget debate. There are a couple other bills in the House that deal with the same issue, but more in line with giving you additional taxing authority as opposed to just a true grant program. So maybe when we get through this cutoff this Wednesday, we'll focus on those bills because they'll probably be exempt from cutoff anyway, because they have a fiscal impact. But maybe we'll set the table with those bills and give you a little more detail on just to kind of see what moves by Wednesday. 5197 is the companion to 1135. So it is still sitting in Senate rules. I'd imagine that's where it stays, given the fact that the House version moved over to the Senate. The environmental crimes legislation did pass the Senate last week. I can't remember if it passed before or after we had talked, but anyway, it did move over to the House and it has a hearing on the 13th. So I'll register the opposition that you gave me. Kyle gave me a couple points too that we talked about a few weeks ago, in particular about how it, I don't necessarily the word harmful, but how it impacts your employees and your potential for hiring employees for the wastewater treatment plant in the future. I mentioned there 5558. That's the timeline bill. It did pass the Senate, so it needs to get a hearing in the House. And then the last one, unfortunately, the 5703, that's the waste to energy bill. It has not moved out of rules. It needs to do that likely today because it does have to pass the Senate by the 5 p.m. deadline tomorrow. So that one's problematic that it hasn't moved, and I haven't checked in to find out why, but I'll dig into that one a little bit more today and try to figure out what's going on. So, like I said, we'll be in committee.
Hang on, Mike.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, go ahead, Commissioner.
On that bill, is there any talk of a different vehicle for delay or some other relief through another bill or some other way if this one doesn't get out of rules?
Not that I know of, Commissioner, but if you've heard of one, let me know. I don't know that there's another bill title out there it fits under. But that's a good question, but I don't know that.
I thought I heard chatter about that from the city, so it might be a good idea.
Okay, I'll see if I can run into my colleagues at the city.
Yeah, instead of a carve out, maybe like a 10-year delay in implementing the.
In this same bill though, or in
I
another
don't
bill?
know. I don't know.
Maybe Kyle knows more. I only heard chatter,
Kyle's-
nothing
yeah.
official, but ideas about other vehicles.
Kyle, you have your hand raised. Do you have something to add to this one?
Can you hear me okay, commissioners?
Yep.
I understand that one of the concerns with this was that it is a one-off, whereas there are several things within the carbon tax bill that is planned for review this year. So the consideration was, rather than doing this individually in advance, I think there's a more holistic review for some additional ins and outs of the carbon tax that is scheduled for this year and in theory implemented by the time waste to energy would be subject.
So Kyle, are you saying so that's a review of the Climate Commitment Act taxes or the program?
Correct.
But I'm not aware of a bill that does that.
No. So
Okay.
I don't know exactly how that works. I've just heard that there are multiple elements within the Climate Commitment Act that are kind of get a revamp and review, and I don't know if they're going to change some of the scales or not. So
Okay.
then I don't know then how that, I don't know the process of how that transfers into law, but I understand there's multiple elements of the Climate Commitment Act that are going to be under review this year.
Okay, I'll dig around and see what I can find out. Because like I said, I'm not aware of there's a few bills dealing with the Climate Commitment Act, but they're not this issue. They're more focused on the purchasing of carbon credits and how it impacts fuels, but not this. So anyway, I will dig around and see if I can't find something out on this and let you know next week.
And Mike, I had heard along the lines of what Commissioner Waldrop said, something, I think it was with Chelly,
Shelley, that's right.
doing like one of those bills, these are the Cascades with the population such as Spokane. But it was a push out, I think, to 2036 or something like that. It was roughly just a 10-year delay
Okay.
implementation, kind of time to study the effects, yada, yada, yada. And I don't remember where I read it, but since we both did, I don't think it was a dream. And
Mark is coming to us in our dreams.
I think I have ever seen, but
Well, commissioners, I'm gonna leave that alone, but I will I'll see what I can find out. I'll try to check with him too. I don't know if I want to dream about waste to energy plants, but anyway.
No, but I would check in with Senator Riccelli because
I will.
think he is doing his best to navigate.
something.
Yeah.
This is a tough one.
Fair enough. I will, I'll reach out to him. And then and my city colleagues as well. So that's all I have. Just kind of updates from pretty much from here on out. And then in a couple of weeks, we'll see a budget that's supposed to be on 24th or 25th. So, but other than that, that's what I have.
Anything else from Mike? Okay, thank you very much, Mike.
All right. Thank you all, Commissioner. Have a good day. Bye.
All right, that brings us to Kevin Ritchie, and you've got several items for us today.
Got a few things here. Good morning. First is an agreement with, sorry, I got this right. Yeah, the first is an agreement with the East Valley School District for using Mountain View Middle School for an upcoming training. This is it's called the Alert Training. It's the Active Attack Integrated Response Training, Train the Trainer course. So this is a course that'll teach our people how to train the rest of our people how to deal with active shooters and crisis or big incidents in schools or facilities like that. It is no cost. This is just an agreement to use the facility. The next is oh, sorry, any questions about? I'm sorry. Apologize.
You're good.
I think the last time we had this training, it was at a kind of different. It was about 2 years ago, so we can move this along. The next
Is it just to cover if anything gets broken?
yes, it's like it's a indemnification kind of thing. The next, if you recall earlier in the year, I briefed a contract with Spokane Police for their range for our SWAT team snipers to use. Unfortunately, all of the dates they had available were not dates that we needed, so we had to kind of back out of that contract, and we found a separate facility. It's a private range called Rock Lake Rifle Range. The cost of this contract is $3,746. I think the cost of this SPD was about $3,400, so it's a slight, a few $100 increase, but they have the dates available and the facilities available, so we're just requesting execution of that contract. Any questions with that? And this is for long range shooting, so it's something we can't do at our indoor range because this is for 100, 200, 300. I think they actually go out to about 700-800 yards, so pretty extensive down there.
Any questions?
Has that been used before, that facility?
They have used it before, very sporadically though. There was no like year-long contract to use it before. They've done some training out there.
Okay.
All right. The next is is the lease for the inland helicopter rental. It's when we purchased Phelps Field, there's an existing lease with inland helicopter. The lease has been reduced because the space that they lease has been reduced. And if you look at the Exhibit A in the packet, it shows the highlighted areas that they are occupying. In the past, they've also occupied the upstairs facility, so it was about twice as much space. We use that as our internal affairs office now, so they've moved out of that and they've moved into a smaller space. So the lease is being reduced by about $1,000 a month.
Any questions?
And then the next, unfortunately, is the resolution for the retirement of Max, one of our canines. If you recall that early last year, one of our canines was involved in an officer-involved shooting. Unfortunately, the canine was struck with a round, and he has recovered. Health-wise, he's recovered, but no longer able to work in the field because of the trauma. So we're just requesting that he's retired, and his current handler, Deputy Bullion, would take possession of him in retirement because of his injuries.
Notify Deputy Bolin that we would not be opposed if Max showed up to the
Okay.
hearing on Tuesday.
I will-
We always enjoy guests.
Would that be tomorrow or next Tuesday?
The next Tuesday this would be on then?
Whenever you guys have it scheduled, yeah. I mean, I would assume you'd probably put it on next
I
Tuesday.
think it's next Tuesday, yeah. I will let him know.
We wouldn't be opposed to that, not at all.
He's nice. He's a nice dog, but he was a puppy too, so it's kind of unfortunate that I didn't retire. Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, that brings us to Jeff Morris.
He's retired now. He learned it though, that's hard work.
So Alicia will be here in a minute to go over kind of the GSI year in review. One thing I just wanted to bring to your attention, GSI is our ADO, which means they get money directly from the state. We have designated them as our economic development partner. That is a 2-year, goes with the biennium in the legislature. So one thing that unless directed to do something different, we do plan on having the ADO resolution to direct the chair to sign it. We have to have it back to the state by mid-April, which would provide that funding to GSI for the next 2 years. I do believe the amount of funding is in question with legislative cuts. So I think GSI has been following that more closely. They'll be able to answer those questions. And then, we also have the 2 contracts with GSI. And when we met with GSI a couple of weeks ago, they had mentioned starting next year, they might be rolling the Advantage Spokane separate contract in with the regular contract. So there might be, sound like there'll be some reduction there, and then it would just be more of a landing page versus a unique website. So kind of wanted to queue those ones up if you had any questions for them. And then, like I said, we'll plan on putting the ADO on next week's 2 p.m. unless you guys surprise me. And then we have a quick minute on federal agenda. We're just at this point planning on repeating last year's earmarks unless I hear otherwise. I sent around an email to all of you. And thank you, Commissioner Jordan, for responding. But that's our plan at
Extra
this
points for
point.
me.
We'll see, at the end of this week, we'll know whether a CR happens, and if so, how long. But we are planning on just doing a renewal of last year's.
Would be.
Which would be the 3 million for the SRSC, and then we'll have to get a feel for Bob Gardner's office interest in the Thorpe Road out by the Fairchild. On that one, just unique situation, the change of people in that position. Thanks for coming early.
It's perfect. We were just walking across the crosswalk.
Well, welcome, Alicia Benson and Joey Gunning.
Yes.
Okay. Well, welcome and great to see you back in here. It's been a while. So we got you all queued up for the presentation, so you can take it away.
Excellent. Well, good morning. Thanks for having us. Nice to see all of you. I met most of you, but Alicia Benson, the CEO at Greater Spokane Incorporated, and I might just have Joey, who's joining me, introduce himself and a little bit his connectivity to a number of the things that we're talking through today.
Yeah, I'm Joey Gunning. I'm our strategic growth manager. I've been with GSI for 5.5 years now. I'm the one who actually manages the ADO deliverables back to Commerce. So all of our business retention and recruitment activities that gets reported back to Commerce. I manage those pieces. And then I manage the implementation of our comprehensive economic development strategy, which is another one of the ADO requirements, that regional planning piece. That's Thrive Spokane is the other name for that. So, yeah.
Goal for today, as we talked with Chair CUNY and talked with Jeff earlier a few weeks ago, wanting to make sure we talk through both we are at the end of nearing the end of the current biennium of the ADO. So we want to be able to talk through some of the ADO metrics, kind of the role and purpose of the ADO. There were questions around there's always good questions around how do we, as your ADO, connect with partners like the public development authorities. So I want to make sure we touch on that. And also the longtime partnership and relationship that we have with the county. And so where does that all intersect as well as we look at both the work over the last couple of years, and then also I don't know if it's in front of you today, but also in front of you over the next couple of weeks is the renewal from the state is around the designation as of who the ADO would be for the next biennium. So that process intersects well. So we want to be able to talk through pieces, but also answer as many questions as you might have. And Joey brought some pieces as well that he can handout as we get into that. So questions welcome. We'll just kind of jump in and go from there. So next slide. One of the key pieces that we want to make sure we're all kind of have our arms wrapped around is your overall investment and the work that GSI does is your ADO. So you have your base investment, which is $75,000 a year, which puts you as a regional visionary in our organization, which we'll go to on the next slide. And the county is our second largest investor in the work that we do across the community. The second piece of your investment is the economic development contract, which specifically speaks to a sets of things that we do. It's really critical in that relationship because once you designate the ADO, we contract with the state of Washington, but per that process, we're required to have a one-to-one match at a minimum in community. And that cannot be matched with any kind of federal funding, but it can be matched with investments from counties, municipalities, private sector in the work that we do. And then it ended at the end of 2024, so was not in the contract renewal for 2025. There had been the investment in Advantage Spokane, and we'll talk about that a little bit more as we get in. Part of the conversation as we went through contract renewal with all of you is that there's a bunch of work that we're looking at with that, and so that we backed off on that investment until we kind of recalibrated around that work. Next slide. Just gives you a snapshot. So where the county is amongst our largest investors as your regional economic development organization. So thank you. And this creates an opportunity. So the chair, so in this case, Chair CUNY is part of our regional visionary group. So they meet quarterly where we bring the top executive entities together to be able to talk kind of synergistically around key economic opportunity, challenges facing community, priority work that this organization is engaged in, those kinds of things. So you are at the right in the middle of that conversation as a county. Go ahead, next slide. One of the pieces that you often have great questions about, and we will tell you gets confusing every year, is how does the formula work? So there is a very specific formula that is managed by the Department of Commerce around how ADOs are funded. There are some specifics in it. There is the ground floor, so the base funding for rural counties, which is the baseline at 40K. And then there is the ceiling, which just was lifted from 2007 levels this last legislative session, which puts the ceiling at $300,000 a year. That's all. It's a population-related matrix that they work through. And so as of 2025, Spokane County, based on population, moved to where your ADO is funded at that ceiling of $300,000 a year. You can see kind of how it goes back and front. One of the things that they've also prioritized and as part of the work that's gone on as an ADO network and with the Washington Economic Development Association is ensuring that our rural ADOs, although the RCW has it at $40,000 a year, they've made a commitment to have base funding for rural ADOs at $85,000 a year, which allows them to be a bit more competitive in the ability to retain people, a person or persons to do some of the work. So you can see that there are only 5 counties that have hit that ceiling. What I will tell you, and you may be aware from your own legislative work, in the proposal of reductions put forward by Governor Ferguson, they're proposing a 50% cut in ADO funding across the state, which would put us the furthest cut for 2 decades to your ADO network across Washington state. Something I definitely, we're in the process of kind of gearing up. We'll be working with all of the counties, et cetera, as we move forward. Obviously, it's proposed right now. As you all know, we'll learn more over the next few weeks. But that really cuts at the heart of the infrastructure for what ADOs do in and out across, obviously here in Spokane County, but across the state. I'll pause for a second just to see, and then that's the last part is about the match that we're required to have with your ADO. So I just want to pause to see if there's any questions on kind of how it formula-wise it works. Yeah, go ahead.
Where does the match come from?
Comes from a few things. So things like the investment from the county. So all of the contracts that we have around economic development from a state level can be matched, as well as some of our private sector investments and special project pieces. So the match has not been, we've been really lucky here in Spokane County to be able to have both the variety of private sector and the relationships with our county and municipal partners to be able to generally meet that match. The only challenge that you run into is that the state utilizes their ADO networks for pass-through or as the lever for a lot of other types of state grants that come in, for example, funding for the Evergreen Bio the industry cluster acceleration funding. That also requires match, and of course, you can't double dip in your match. And so those kind of strategic private and public partners around the work. So track all of that to make sure it's.
So 300,000 for the state piece plus a 300,000 match.
Minimum. Yeah, just for just as your ADO, not before you get into any of the other responsibilities that. Okay, next slide. And I'm gonna hand it off to Joey. This we pulled out a couple of pieces, and I would say in the PowerPoint deck that you all received, we are not gonna go through all of the slides, I assure you. But we did include a supplemental set of slides so that you have, because you've often had great questions about what are we required to report. There is, I did not count them this morning, but 8 more slides that are supplemental that are all of the things that we're required to track, report, across the board, from small business supports and assistance to diversity, equity, and inclusion data, things that continue to get added on regardless of what the investment level. And so far the conversation has been, regardless of what the investment level to ADOs is, that reporting framework continues. And there's also a bill in the legislature to add additional reporting requirements to counties and ADOs. But this just is a quick snapshot of the kind of 2 big key pieces. Can you just go back for 1 second? Sorry. The 2 kind of key pieces when we look at direct business assistance, as well as then the regional coordination and planning role that ADOs have. Our work really spreads back and forth between those 2 pieces. So with that, I'll hand it off to Joey to talk about some of the ADO metrics and performance over the last couple of years.
So if you want to advance, so these are our specific requirements that we have to hit in Spokane County. These numbers look different for each ADO across the state. We work these through with the Department of Commerce every biennium to determine what our targets should be. These are, again, those main categories of business retention, expansion, recruitment, startup support, export, and then training can be pretty broad. Any sort of business training that we provide, we can count that as a training. And then we just need a marketing plan in place. But yeah, again, those change every biennium depending on how we negotiate that with Commerce. And so then this is just some of the key wins in those categories that we wanted to highlight for you. And again, so I have scorecards that go into this in a lot more detail. I don't have enough for everybody at the table, but I have 7 of these. That's in the folder. There's a scorecard that shows all of the work we've done in these areas, as well as this is a new recruitment piece that we just printed for our Advantage Spokane side of things, which is our business recruitment efforts. Just a pretty basic collateral with some facts and figures around the largest employers, employment numbers, general information that businesses looking into the county want to know. I'll just leave those here for now, but going through some of our recruitment efforts, the Remy Health one was a big win that was generated through our old VP of Economic Development, Gary Ballou, went on sales missions, and he identified Remy Health from Seattle, told them about Spokane. They were looking to grow, and they've decided to expand in Spokane. Really cool win story that highlights the purpose of sales missions and kind of why we do that work. And then through those sales missions and other trade shows that he's attended, we're managing this active lead pipeline. We have about 47 leads in there right now. That's just this long game of continuing to build those relationships and tell them about Spokane. And I also send a newsletter every month to site selectors across the country. And then those are just some highlights of our retention and expansion numbers over the past 2 years. We launched the Spokane Inclusive Business Catalyst, which is an accelerator program specifically targeting underrepresented populations. We do that in partnership with community-based organizations such as AHANA, Women's Business Center. And we've graduated 31 businesses, and each one receives a $5,000 grant from GSI. That's from our Believe Spokane funding that we raised a couple of years ago. And so it's been a really successful program. I think it's a really tangible way that we've been impacting our local, small, diverse businesses. And it's received really strong feedback. We're just at this point, it's really funding constrained. And so we're just trying to find ways to grow and sustain that program. Yeah, any questions on any of these pieces?
Are those types of efforts funded out of the ADO dollars?
Which ones, which efforts, sorry?
Like the underrepresented business and the sales
Great
missions?
question. So the way that it leverages the ADO funding more or less supports the people. that we have working at GSI to carry out the work. There's a few requirements of your ADO. There's specific trainings that they're required to go to a few times a year. That pretty much what the ADO contract covers. And then with the investment from the county, we have the Police Spokane funding that allows that we had a number of private sector partners come together. Those are the dollars that we're then able to utilize for the both like sales missions trips and or really to be able to leverage the development of the Spokane Inclusive Business Catalyst. And so that the two pieces, and for us, when we think about it for the county, the ADO funding is what helps you have the human capital to be able to do the work.
Thank you.
Advance, and then I talked about our regional planning pieces, the SEDS, Thrive Spokane. We received a EDA grant 3 years ago to develop that, and we've been implementing that over the past 3 years, working with our regional partners. Probably one of our most impactful projects of last year was the Economic Recovery Core Fellowship. It was an inaugural program through the IEDC to launch fellows into the different communities in the region. Coming out of COVID-19, looking for specific recovery projects. We decided to pursue a project around the growth of the creative economy and establishing certified creative districts. So our fellow Daria Pilgrim has been here for a little over a year now. And she has just hit the ground running. She's been working with Hilliard and Garland and other communities to grow their creative economies. Really, it's been, I think, a really cool example of transformational neighborhood economic development. And the work that she's doing, again, not just to establish these creative districts, but to the intersection of creative economy and economic development, I think she understands really well. And so just the broader stroke economic development that we're seeing from that and the ripple effect has been really cool to see and transformational. And so I think it's definitely one of our highlights from 2024. And that fellowship is 2.5 years. So we have about a little over a year left on that fellowship.
And if I can just add, and I think a little bit, Commissioner Waldorf and I were on a panel last week. I think there is a lot of work around the life and health sciences work, the Evergreen Bio, the Tech Hub, the efforts with intent and the Energy Hub. But then there's this whole thread of the kind of placemaking and local kind of economic development effort, that how tourism intersects with all of that. So there's been a lot around the art intersection, those kinds of things. And part of that work of the fellow has been able to really start to string together a lot of what has been happening within our public development authorities, particularly, as well as some of the work over aid. But how do we actually have the place where people want to both stay and be part of community while we're also building these large innovation, hubs and jobs? The intersection's been really
What's the funding for the fellowship?
The funding is through, the funding, I believe, comes from EDA, US EDA. The program's administered by IEDC, International Economic Development Council.
Is there a film element to that project?
There is. She's actually, so through her work, she's developed an opportunity to grow a film workforce. I think that's an opportunity she's identified. And so she's working on that's what it means to develop talent in the film area to be able to support the rise of the film industry. And so she's working with a number of partners on growing that as we look to establish a film office and grow that. So that's very much a part of her work. Yeah.
be happy at the other point. Just the creative economy work that's happening is really impressive. They're looking at a lot of kind of redevelopment too, working with the real estate and developer community on how do they redevelop some of the different spaces and vacant buildings and recatalyzation of that. So happy to have her provide a briefing to whomever if you're interested. It cuts across a number of kind of the layers when we think about just the kind of strands of economic development. It's been pretty catalytic.
Yeah, and that last piece I think is just really, GSI is known for events, I think. And so I mentioned our major events there. That's what we do. We convene the community together. We convene around critical issues. We're leading the In Schools campaign, which is an education campaign around the importance of schools in our region. And so that's a very important initiative that GSI is leading. And just we show up in these spaces that matter to the community. So. Yeah, I think that's it for that slide. And this talks about our specific partnerships, as Alicia mentioned, with the public development authorities. And so I won't get into all of this, but we partner very closely with each one of our PDAs. With S3R3, we work closely around recruitment efforts, and we were really partnered with them in the Tech Hub work and a lot of other initiatives. But they're a really key partner for us as we consider the growth of the West Plains area and how we manage that growth. University District, we have a staff member, Stacia, who sits on the University District Board meetings. We support them with grant applications. And they're really involved in that overall life science, health science work. The Northeast PDA, that's talking about the creative economy. That's Hilliard is one of the main focus areas for that creative district. And so Jesse Bank and the Northeast PDA have been really involved in that project. That picture on the right is one of those Hilliard creative district planning meetings. You can see one of the gentlemen standing in the back is his name's Jared. He's on the PDA staff. So they've just been really involved in supporting and fostering that work. And so it's been a really cool partnership to see there. And then Broadlink, we participated on the broadband action team. And that's also, we partner closely anytime we have a business looking for coming in to locate somewhere in rural areas. As we think about how we get them access to fiber and broadband connectivity, we work closely with Broadlink on those issues. So they're really important economic development partners. And same thing with the airport and the Air Force Base. We've partnered with them on a number of projects. I highlighted the BNSF certified site that the airport helped to convene. We showed up to talk about incentive information and other economic development incentives. And again, as you consider our recruitment efforts and our work out on the West Plains, the airport's a really strong partner for us out there. And then as well as the Fairchild Air Force Base, in the SED, they have their own scope of work, because as our largest employer, we want to make sure that we are maintaining a strong relationship with them and help doing whatever we can to support them and their families. That's the youth camp that we supported for the children of the airmen. But yeah, again, another, as our number one employer, really important partnership for us.
And then just the last piece, as we were talking, some of you are a little bit more familiar with this. We may have talked about it at high level when we last got together, but we did evolve our governance structure significantly a couple of years ago. So this year, 2025 is the first year we're kind of fully in it, which will large leadership advisory council. And then we have a board of 17. And then we have a number of key committees that are really driving the connectivity and work across the role that we play as the ADO. And so from a county perspective, you've had Commissioner CUNY as chair, sits on the Leadership Advisory Council and sits on the Regional Advocacy Committee, not the Regional Advocacy Committee, on the Regional Visionaries Committee. Jeff is represented in the Regional Advocacy Committee. And I think one of the areas that we actually talked about when we met is you have not had a person specifically on the Economic Development Committee as we've moved into this new structure. And so the committees are really built with the Leadership Advisory Council, a lot of employer and private sector support. And we've been working with our public sector partners on who best and where best do they fit. And so I think that's an area I'd be really interested in ensuring that you guys are represented. That's chaired by David Condon and Chair-elect Stephanie Curran. And then you have not had representation in those other three committees. Again, it's open. So as any of our partners, you have the opportunity to have representation on all of the committees if that's something that's of interest, but also know that you as a group serve on many places, but we want to ensure that you have the right person as a conduit. And things like the Regional Advocacy Committee, we do Friday, like during the legislative session, we do every Friday policy calls with our lobbyist and those kinds of opportunities. And so want to make sure that we're continually, whether it's certain staff, yourselves as commissioners, Scott as CEO, that we're getting you plugged in. That's how you kind of keep moving. I think that's it. Thank you. Questions?
I did actually, before we close there, Gary wanted me to touch on one more piece. Jeff, I think you may have seen some emails, but we, as your ADO, we've retained a grant writer through the state grant writer grant program. And so we have a grant writer who's available and ready to support different grant applications. So and specifically, she's focused on in Spokane Valley and for Spokane County. And so if you have grant writing needs, definitely reach out. I don't know if you've connected with Pia, but her name's Pia Hellenberg, and she's
It's a different person. I met with the lady.
It was
a year
Stacy
ago.
or Julie.
well, yeah, it's a different person now. Yeah. So we just wanted to make sure you're aware of that as well. Yeah. Questions?
Well, I appreciate knowing that, because I think we had maybe a year and a half ago, Gary, myself, and Alicia and Commissioner CUNY, we all met to discuss, you know, how can we do better to, instead of everybody having to employ their own grant writer, can we share when there's a opportunity, right, to have an investment in the community and the county? So that's exciting. So is she on like a retainer for you guys?
Through this June, yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Good to know.
Yeah, it's been, the contracting process has been very slow with the Department of Commerce. But there is a two-part. So when they renew the program, we actually have two. So back to when you guys often see this as the larger county in the areas too. So we actually have two grant writers. So we're supporting as this ADO for this region for commerce. We're supporting, we have a grant writer specific for work in Spokane County. We also have a grant writer on retainer to support a number of our rural counties around us. So we have Adams, Whitman, I'm gonna forget, Ponderay, and maybe one other that are all have access to and are kind of working through that kind of grant building capacity as well. Which is it's an interesting time as we look at particularly state and federal grant funding, but a huge, just really capacity building both for within Spokane County, but also within the rural ADO network, which we're leaned on a lot, which would maybe be a unique aspect for all of you when you're designating your ADO. We're leaned on a lot to help support those surrounding rural ADOs because they only have a half to maybe a full-time FTE, depending on where they're placed within their respective county.
Just to follow up on the strategic plan that you talked about, what's the name of it?
Thrive Spokane.
Drive Spokane.
Yeah.
So do you have here in the packets, like the key goals and what you guys have accomplished with that plan, like to date?
So that's not in the packets, no. I can provide that to you.
Yeah, I'd be interested, because I was, when I was working at the Northeast Community Center, I was tangentially involved in giving feedback and filling out lots of surveys and giving input into what I thought, our region should do at the time to invest in making sure everybody can access jobs and economic opportunities and prosperity. And there was a lot of I thought that the plan turned out with a lot of great ideas around investing in some of the, underrepresented communities, but also just folks that have been left behind in the economy, right? And need to get access to education and retraining. So how do you see your work connected to like the efforts of Launch Northwest, kind of on the education side and like getting a workforce that's educated and credentialed? How do you see that work? And are you guys contributing to Launch Northwest, or what's the connection?
So we're part of our VP of Education and Talent sits on the Leadership Council for Launch Northwest. We actually are one of the grant funded partners for Launch Northwest on some of their Empower mentoring work, particularly right now with Spokane Public Schools. So one of our employees is supporting the build out, because one of the other functions, so we serve as the Associate Development Organization for Spokane County. We also serve as the Career Connect Northeast network for Eastern Washington. And so that's kind of our intersection in with the Launch Northwest effort. So we're working on all of that, kind of the build out and infrastructure support with employers and schools, both K-12 and higher education, around pathways training, workforce infrastructure, those kinds of things. And so the intersection, we look at the work of Launch. We supported their both parts of their legislative acts this year. We see it really critical as this long-term kind of, when we think about investment in kids and families, and then how are we supporting with the role that we play as a regional economic development organization, the employer intersection, training pathways, advocacy, those kinds of things. So it intersects daily, I feel like. Yeah.
Well, and it's like the Workforce Development Council is really leading the efforts around training and workforce development, but obviously if you're trying to get businesses to grow or establish themselves, here, they have to have that workforce. So it's a real interconnected effort.
Yeah, and we work a lot with the Workforce Council. We think about that because they have a lot of the investment around some of the workforce training. But when we think about employer partners, we worked on some specific efforts around certain populations with them over the last couple of years. A number of different things where we recruit certain business and employer partners to partner alongside whatever funding mechanism they're working on.
Yeah, if I could get some follow-up on the plan and like what's been implemented in different communities. I know there's a lot of small business support groups, Simba, Latinos in Spokane. They're doing a lot of work to help small, like one-person shops open up and get an income stream and establish themselves, which is like critical, for stability and prosperity. How do you see yourselves supporting all those other small business efforts and entrepreneurial efforts?
Yeah, I mean, as we think about regional planning, first of all, I think this next year is really important because we're coming to the end of that 5-year regional planning period. And so as we develop this next iteration of it, we really want to understand what's worked well, what have we accomplished, what are we missing, maybe where are the gaps, and really identify those areas for the next 5 years. But we try to partner with those community-based organizations as much as we can. I mentioned Ahana in our Spokane Inclusive Business Catalyst, because really to work with and support those business communities, you have to have trust. And those organizations have those trusted relationships with those populations. And so I think leaning on them for support, but also capacity building. They need this as organizations, they need the support, they need the resources as well. So that's part of the Inclusive Business Catalyst is we contract with the organization, not just to help us with the work, but we pay them too. And so that they can have the resources and capacity that they need to help us with the work as well. That's one of the things we heard in the SEDS planning as we had these organizations coming to the table to support us with this regional planning efforts, is that they need to be supported as well. And so that's something where we want to work into our next, as we pursue funding for the next round of SEDS, how we can incorporate support for those community organizations who are volunteering their time to show up to the table and communicate their needs and be a part of this plan. And so working those pieces in, I think, will be really critical going forward.
Could you give us an update on Advantage Spokane?
Oh, yes.
Every year we have a discussion, because that's more of my understanding, that's a website more to everybody outside of the Spokane region. So we don't necessarily firsthand see the impact of it. Can you talk about visits, successes, things that relate back to that website?
I will just say, so we are this year, next year, we are working to revamp that site. We're working with an agency to help us drive more leads, to be able to analyze those leads, convert those leads into converted businesses. But the main driver of that site's functionality right now is the GIS planning tool, which we have access to through the State Department of Commerce. And so I think for this next year, we are looking into leaning into that partnership, utilizing that tool through the State Department of Commerce. And we will not be asking our partners for funding for that site this year, and really take a step back and work on building out the functionality of that site, make it make it so that we can come to you and say, hey, this site, those questions you just asked, I'll be able to answer those hopefully next year. Say, here's what the site can do, here's what the traffic we've seen to it, here's the value in it. But while we do that work, we're going to take a step back and not ask our partners for funding for that this year.
We gathered feedback over the last couple of years because it hasn't been, a tool is only as good as it's utilized, and there are certain functions on it that were getting utilized well. And even although the idea when it was originally built is this piece that's part of an outbound recruitment effort, which is what we did use if we were doing a very specific targeted sales mission. That's where you drive traffic. And you saw, if you follow on the Google Analytics, you can see all of the spikes when you have a very specific and intentional effort there. But one of the pieces that we found, much like the GIS planning pieces, is that that's a tool that actually a lot of our own market is using. So it's where when developers and brokers are looking for working with companies are looking for available site, whether they're already here or looking to expand. So it's not used in this, there's different parts and pieces of the website. There's the website that talks about here's the advantages of Spokane, but there's also the tools built into it. And so as they have gathering feedback over the last year, we want to really take a if we're gonna invest in a tool that's doing that type of thing, how is it of the highest and best use? And then how do you support that sustainability? And that was an evolution tool. That tool used to be hosted out at Eastern for a decade. And so it's just been this very kind of evolutionary aspect of what do we need as a center, you know, how do people find us, whether they're already here or they're wanting to be in our market? How do you have a shared landing page, but then you want to get people to where they need to get, whether it's industry specific, whether it's municipal specific, whatever it might be. And so, but that partnership is also highly dependent upon it, having the partners have people who are also dedicating time and energy. You know, so City of Spokane Valley, I'd say uses it the most, but they have a 4-person dedicated economic development team. And so that allows them to ensure that the data and the content and that, you know, how they're using and interfacing with GIS planning. We don't have that for the majority of their partners in the county. We have a bit of that's been a unique role for them.
And I'm trying to remember, was Advantage Spokane, because I want to say 6-7 years ago, Visit Spokane was a part of where, was Advantage Spokane originally planned to be the website where you would go there and it was like, whether, you know, the landing page was originally gonna be like visits, you know, visiting, moving to, or working in Spokane, and you'd kind of click, you know, what your goal was. Did you want to come?
Talked about that.
Tourism,
Yeah.
move here, or doing business here, and then that would sort of take you sort of on the 3 pathways, you know, sort of within the website.
I'd say pre-pandemic. We
Yes.
talked about that as we rebuilt and we reutilized the tool. We worked both very closely with Visit Spokane at the time around the back end of data. Where are people coming from? So we think about the fact that they're funded to be out when we think about bringing convention and tourism to our community. People often come to Spokane first as a tourist, but you know, well, from being on there, and then they look at investing in business. And so the conversation was, could you have a tool that does all of those functions? Could you have a landing page anyway? Like because again, how people are getting here.
And I think
shouldn't
it
be
was based on
complicated.
maybe like Indianapolis or something had a page like that was looked at kind of as a template.
And
I
we've
think at the
seen,
time.
we haven't seen as many that do the intersection from a visitor side, but we definitely have seen some communities that have done both if you're coming as a business or if you're coming as somebody looking to work. Particular as we've moved into a more mobile workforce. Could you have a page that speaks to both of that? We haven't. That's a little bit of this again, but what do we want to invest in as a community around that vehicle?
So Gary, I heard just last week recently left to take a different position. How are you, or are you reimagining the team or opportunities for leadership of this economic development piece of GSI's portfolio? Because to me, it's a really unique, important role. You guys also have your chamber work, but this is really focused on the prosperity for everyone in the region through business investment. So what are your thoughts as, you know, Gary left us, but maybe it's an opportunity to think about just restructuring the economic development pieces, or I was just wondering what your thoughts were.
Yeah, lots of thoughts.
Lots of thoughts.
Always have lots of thoughts, probably for sidebar conversations at this moment. There is a need for and Joey, I know I've chatted with some of our team members there. We have a great team with a lot of skills. So there's also we play this just umbrella kind of connective role. And so some of the expertise around the inner workings of how cities and county governments work, how funding mechanisms work when we look at different mechanisms, whether it's TIFs or TBDs or all of those kinds of things. There was that's a skill set that came when we purposefully hired Gary almost 5 years ago. So those are still needs. You know, Joey is phenomenal, and he's going to be going through his certified economic development training here. He's going to fit for that this summer. No pressure now, it's on public record.
I guess you're doing it now.
And so, but there's a level of just expertise around economic development that we've only had in a handful of people. Gary was one of those. We have it with Chris Panger out at S3R3 that are true economic developers. I'm not an economic developer by training or nature. And so that's part of what we're kind of wading through on how might we staff that? What does that look like? Who might we recruit? What kind of skills that do we need? The side part of that is that if we're going to have a 50% cut to ADO funding, that has real impacts on our ability to staff. We also have there's a proposed $6 million cut to Career Connected Learning funding in the state of Washington, which also impacts all of the education and talent work that your ADO does. So that is. So we're in a little bit of this kind of, I am gathering, and I would love to have I'm having lots of conversations right now with folks around the economic development function and role and what kind of human capital makes the most sense. But I also am not going to make any hiring decisions until we have a better handle on how the legislative session shakes out, which was not where we started 2 weeks ago, because the ADO funding proposal reduction was a surprise to all of us. Sorry, that's not that runs around it, but if you have, any of you have ideas and insights as you are working with us, I would welcome them. And we're, there is some unique skill set that we need as we look at the work with your public development authorities, and some of those other things. There's just a level of expertise and knowledge that we need to have as your regional ADO. And so wanting to make sure that we're filling that space.
Yeah, if there's a way to
And continue to grow great people.
understand the current skill sets you have. And at the PDAs, and then what could there be some leveraging, right, of the PDA funds with the ADO funds to get fill those gaps of different areas that we could use some more skill sets.
You've really grown your list of regional visionary partners. I think back when I first came to commission, it was only like a handful. You've got.
We
got a pretty
did,
impressive
one of
list.
your feedbacks from all of you, the county included, is you wanted to be recognized for your total investment in GSI. And so we've shifted how we do that. And then we've grown some of those top sectors. We've added people to the market like ICCU. So that also changes, but yeah, it has grown over the last 5-6 years.
Well done. What's the cost of regional visionary now?
So the minimum entry is $51,500, which is your base, like your base investment level. And it goes up from there.
Great. Lost Chris. Anything else? Jeff?
Well, there's on the 2P next week for the ADO renewal. It's due back to the state by the 15th of April, so we'll be on money for that.
Okay. Well, thank you both very much for
Thank
being
you.
here.
Appreciate it. If you have other questions, let us know and we'll follow up with those.
Thank you very much.
One down.
What?
For the record keeping.
Yep. Okay. That brings us to Joel Graff. You don't look like Joel. No. That looks like Joel Graff.
You'll recognize our TV star.
As seen on
Our
TV,
TV
yeah.
star yesterday.
Oh, what
Yeah,
were
this
you
is
on?
great.
He's a TV star.
He's on Creme.
Oh, okay.
Talking about potholes.
I was just gonna say, I'm like, usually when Public Works is on the news, it's not good.
It's either snow removal or potholes.
Joel's been very anxious to get on the camera and he was finally able to.
Yes, I was super anxious. Favorite thing. Good morning, commissioners. This is just a FYI briefing of some of the innovations that Joel and team have are bringing forward into our equipment fleet. So just a little bit of context, as you know, we have, we got to do more with less. We've got a dwindling revenue stream and everything's costing more. So the team has been looking at some innovative materials to add into our fleet, really attachments. So some of this stuff has been around for a while, but they were
previously offered as individual pieces of equipment. We cannot be adding more components to or we can't be adding more to our fleet. We can't afford to maintain and then eventually replace additional pieces of equipment. So some of these elements, we just wanted to let you know what we're doing and what we will be doing this summer. You'll already see a couple of these are starting to show up as legislative purchases. They're all kind of below certain dollar thresholds, but they will show up on your legislative agenda. And the cool thing about most of this equipment, if not all of it, is it all can be attached to our existing grader fleet. We have these very, very expensive graders, but they don't work year round. You know, they do their big hit in grading roads. They work in the winter. They sit pretty idle during the summer and we're not putting hours on them. So the team has come up with some pretty cool ideas here. And if we can possibly get these links to work, we'll give you a little preview of what we're looking at.
Yeah, it'll work.
So describe what's going on if this comes up.
Yeah.
Because it's a PDF.
So our very first attachment that we want to get is it's
to the
called a
YouTube?
road widener.
Yeah.
And it
It doesn't
attaches
need
to
audio,
the
though.
front of the grader.
It doesn't need audio. The video will tell.
Yeah. So this is a machine that you can either run rock through to shoulder the edges of the roads. And as you can see, you can run asphalt through them to do patches. Which I think we'll probably use that quite often this year once we receive the equipment. Got lots of patching to do. But like I said, it will not be mounted onto a small level skid steer like that. We tried that before and it doesn't work. We're just gonna put it on a grader, something that is big enough to push dump trucks along while they dump into the hopper. And they place the material exactly where we want it, as opposed to the old way that we've been doing it is we spread rock all over the road and then we use a grader to smear it out over the edge, and it's a lot of wasted material. Rock costs a lot of money and I don't like wasting it. So this puts it exactly where we want it. And if we want a 2-foot shoulder, we get a 2-foot shoulder. We want a 1-foot shoulder, we get a 1-foot shoulder, so on and so forth. If when we comes to using it with asphalt, it will work great. So a lot of those patches that we have that are, you know, wheel rut patches, we might have to grind them out a little bit and then we can use this to place the material right in the patch and compact it, and it's done, you know.
Ron, if you go to the next slide on the presentation, there's another link. Also with the current way we do shouldering and such, just frankly, just requires more people, more pieces of equipment. And then you gotta sweep it after the fact, and there's just a lot more moving pieces as opposed to, hey, let's just put the material where we want it exactly.
So
And
Were you indicating that this is a new piece of machinery, that it used to be a standalone piece of equipment, but as an attachment?
Yeah,
That's,
yes.
that's sort of the new
It'll just be
technology,
attached
being an attachment?
onto the grader. Yeah.
Okay.
This next one is called a retriever. So I foresee this being used a lot, you know, currently on most of our gravel roads. We by the end of winter, we've graded a lot of the rock that's on the roads out into the ditches. And this machine will grab the rock, throw it back onto the road to where it can be reprocessed and put on back onto the road where it's needed, not laid in waste out in the ditches. So it's basically keeping the rock that we've bought and put down back onto the road and reusing it. It's and it also does a very good job of mulching the grass that's right next to the road. So I mean, it serves two purposes. So it kind of cleans up the edges of the road also. And a lot of these attachments we will be using in the summertime, when typically we wouldn't be out grading because it's too dry and too much fire danger to grade.
What was that one more time? What time of year would you use this?
We'd be using these during the summer in the dry season.
Oh, so
Yes, so we have
we'd be having equipment out during the dry time of the year instead of only in the fall and spring when it's grading season. So we'd be utilizing our equipment more often during the year as opposed to just letting it set for 3 months in the summer.
So there's kind of a triplicate win with this in that you're retrieving gravel that then goes back onto the roadway that we can reuse. Over time, we can narrow up our gravel roads. If you've been out in some, particularly out in the West Plains, we've got 40-foot wide gravel roads. And that's just completely unnecessary. It's more to maintain, it's more to blade, requires more rock. So we can start to work those back towards. And then actually, if you put a bit of an angle on that machine, you do get some kind of light ditching with it as well. So part of that stormwater component we talked about yesterday can be achieved with this. At least it'll be an improved area for the water to run off.
And these are very easy to attach. As you can see, they're just bolt-on attachments. So it's one guy can probably put it on in 2 hours and you're ready to go. Okay, so the next one that we have is our brushing mulching machine. So it's basically a masticator head on an arm. Currently, when we do our brushing around the county, we have 10, 12 guys go out with chainsaws, pole saws, bucket trucks and everything, trying to clear brush from the sides of the road. Very labor intensive. Oh, wrong one. That's okay. We can talk about this is the ditching machine. So this machine can create and clean ditches, as you can see it, at about 2 to 3 miles an hour. When currently with a backhoe, you might get a mile of ditch done in 1 day with a backhoe, and this thing's just motoring right along, making a new ditch where there was no ditch, and it also cleans out the existing ditches.
And this thing just mounts to an arm on our existing graders. We've got plenty of hydraulic capacity within our graders to be able to operate these pieces of equipment. So also just using what we have in a different innovative way. And you think about what it takes to run a backhoe down a ditch line, which there'll still be some of, but for our kind of long runs, that's won't be
that machine won't work everywhere. Like out on the West Plains where we have solid rock. I mean, it would destroy that thing. But you know, in the West Plains, there's a hunk of rock and then you've got half a mile of dirt. You know, you could easily create a ditch wherever there's dirt. North side of town up north, District 1, that's all sand. That thing would fly through it, you know, like butter. So basically what we're looking at is trying to get more work done in less time, which gives our guys more time to do other things like culvert replacements and all that kind of stuff that's very important now, especially, you know, you guys all seen the storm runoff throughout lots of culverts this year. Tore out lots of roads, and we need bigger culverts than we currently have in lots of areas. So it gives us more capacity to work on stormwater.
Ron, there should be one more slide in there. It's the brushing tool.
Yes. Yeah, so so the previous attachment will work on this arm also. So this machine will, you know, at 2 or 3 miles an hour, take care of all of the brush along the sides of the road. It can also reach up to 20 feet tall. And it doesn't just cut the brush off, it mulches it. It's more like what you saw up by the north side landfill where the masticator came through and ground everything up. So it doesn't just leave piles of brush everywhere when it's done. It's ground up into smaller bits. So it should work very good on most areas in our county. I don't know if you guys know this, but Spokane County has a lot of thorn brush. And guys hate brushing thorn brush because they come out cut up all over by the end of the day. And why be cut up when you can have some guy in a grader just sitting there grinding it down? So, and also, you know, I've heard stories where, like up on Blanchard, where they've sent a crew of 15 guys up there to do brushing. At the end of the day, at the end of the 10-hour day, they turn around and they look back and they said, we only went 1,000 feet. That's pretty demoralizing, in my opinion, at the end of the day. When you can actually get some work done with an attachment.
Nice. What's the benefit to brushing? I mean, it's off the roadway. It looks like it kind of creates a natural barrier between the road and what looks like a farm in this video. I mean, why not just leave it? What's the benefit to taking that out?
So we do a lot of brushing in preparation for our overlay projects and our chip seal projects because the brush is crowded into the road so much. So we need to push it back so that our equipment can get through without tearing branches off and limbs off.
Okay.
And this thing has the reach to where it can trim overhead branches and everything so that our
Okay.
equipment our dump trucks can be fully up, dumping rock into our chip spreader and not have to worry about, you know, tearing out giant tree branches and having to go back and retrim them.
Okay.
And these examples aren't quite as how we would be using this. We don't need to be reaching 10 feet
Yeah.
off the road
Okay.
to be clearing brush. But there's a lot of places where, you know, on Blanchard, Mount Spokane, I mean, the brush is taking the road back. Or areas where you have sight distance areas where you do at corners. That would be the areas where you do want to get about 10 feet back because you want to make sure you have clear sight distance for safety in those. But we have plenty of roads. I mean, even just it's amazing how quickly it happens. Stevens Creek, you know, coming up to the trailhead right there. If you don't keep that knocked back, that'll just start, you know, crowding over the roadway and creating issues.
Okay.
So the two of those pieces of equipment, they work off the same boom arm that can be mounted right to the side of the grader. So we're going to test a few of these out this year. And kind of rotate them around the district, see where the successes and the challenges occur. And then, you know, keep reviewing these moving forward as we continue to build on what we like and what we don't. But a lot more work done with a lot less manpower.
Just one each of these attachments?
Yes.
Wasn't there
One-
two of one of them?
Well, the retriever, we're getting two, the one
Okay.
that pulls the gravel back onto the road, we're getting two of those.
Okay.
But everything else is just one.
And this is all fitting into our budget for our 2025 equipment replacement plan. We found a couple of used pieces of equipment that we had intended to buy new. And so we're able to afford these within our budget for the 2025 year, just based on the savings from buying some used pieces of equipment.
On the briefing sheet, it says for all of these, $206,000 total. That I'm amazed.
That was gonna be my question. That's excellent.
Yeah. No,
I'm shocked you can get all of those for
Yeah.
206,000. That's
it's,
well done.
It's, well, that's half the price of buying another
Yeah.
grader. Yeah, so, yeah, if we can use our graders more during the summer, I'm all for it. You know, gotta get some of this work done.
You obviously
during
shopped
the-
around to find.
Right.
Well, you know, the big
Well
thing
done.
is historically, a lot of this work would be a dedicated piece of equipment. So you've got an engine, you got a cab, you got the chassis, you got the wheels, you got everything, a hydraulic system. We have these dang near $500,000 graders that are just powerhouse workforces. And they've got 1,000 gallons per minute.
No, we only need 40 gallons a minute to run any of those attachments.
Well, what's our capacity?
80.
Okay,
So
so
we got way more, we got double what we need to run anything. Okay.
Lot of rural application with these, but we have a lot of rural roads. Yes, and the team has done a great job with sourcing some lightly used piece of equipment for us to try it out, so. I'm excited for it. I thought you guys would all enjoy the videos of what it would look like in action. And we'll do our own YouTube videos as well.
Well, let us know when you fire them up and you take them out.
Yeah.
Would love to.
We
I'd
don't-
love to
we
go
don't
see
have any
some
of
of
them
these.
yet,
in action.
but
No, I know.
They're coming.
This summer, you know,
Yes.
tell us where to be and
Yep.
we'll come check them out.
And this is particularly just strategic for us because, as you guys know, you know, we hit our grading season with everybody we got, right? We're in our roads and sweeping at that time typically marries up. And in the summertime, 90% of our workforce is on our special crews, right? Our crack seal, overlay, and chip seal. So we are left with just skeleton crews in the districts, but skeleton crew can run a piece of equipment like this and actually get some good meaningful work done. So we're really excited about what we're going to be able to accomplish with, like you said, a pretty minimal investment and freeing up a lot of manpower.
Any more questions? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, item number Jordan Neal, we're gonna kick that a week, since both Mary and Al aren't here for that briefing, so we will bring that item back a week from today. So we will jump to Scott, and in turn, that means we're also going to strike this afternoon
Oh, on consent.
the coinciding item. I'm looking to see what item that B, 4B. So we'll strike that this afternoon too, since they're not here for the briefing, and we'll bring that up next week. Okay, that brings us to Scott Chesney, our Director of Planning. You're gonna talk about farm and agriculture conservation, current use. So go on, you got it.
Those exciting things that this process as a government. Next slide, please. This is a single request. And it's a parcel on our north side, northeast of the metro area. It's 11 acres in the middle of a small tract ag section. Next, please. You can see the aerial. There's some cultivation around it. There's some remaining forestry around it. It's in that system. Next, please. So this is from ag to the Farm and Ag Conservation Program. Single parcel. The applicants they have produced a farm plan for keeping it qualified and preserving the ability to go back to grain or alfalfa. Running that also includes having a weed control plan in place for that. The application, which you've seen in the staff report, is fairly lengthy, but achieved 165 points, which gives them their maximum discount. Public hearing was held before the Public Benefit Rating Board, which is the Planning Commission with a different title for the day. And that board recommends the approval of the Board of County Commissioners. When this is in place, it is administered by the assessor's office because it is a tax program, and they have to produce an annual report both on weed control and any progress on that. So the other thing that we've done with this, we've made requesting a slight modification to our normal schedule. We're briefing this with you obviously this morning. We've placed the receive the recommendation and set resolution on your legislative agenda for this afternoon for consideration in 1 week rather than spacing these out into a 3-week cycle. And if that proves to be worthwhile, we'll use that model in many things going forward. Open to any questions. Again, this is pretty straightforward. We've done several of these in the last couple of years.
And this is just something that would go on a consent agenda in the
Yes.
future?
Yes.
Yeah, so in the past, we've had the 2-touch rule, so briefing today, no action earlier than next week generally. Because this one is simply an action on your legislative, an action to set the hearing or set the notice out a couple of weeks. We thought we'd be a little more efficient and do the action to set the notice the same time, same day as the briefing. Of course, you all can determine, hey, I got more questions on this, not ready to set it for hearing, or not ready for the hearing to take place. So there still gives you some time to do that, if that works for you all.
Well, the briefing says receive the recommendation on the 11th, so that's today, and then consideration on the 18th, so
Yes.
next week.
Yes.
Okay. But this isn't something that requires a public hearing with us. This is just a consent agenda item. Because it went through the planning or the
Exactly. By
planning
your-
commission by another name.
Your normal procedural standards of tasking the PC, or in this case, the Public Benefit Rating Board, to handle that public hearing for you. And then bring any comments back.
Sounds good.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. And then we've got you for the next one too.
Yes, that is, and we have no slides for that. It's simply a request to begin negotiations on a contract for project manager services for our comprehensive plan update. This is funded through our commerce grants, so there's no impact on the county. And simply put, we're bringing someone on board to monitor schedules, workflow of our various consultants and our staff to keep things on task. So obviously we try not to make or miss any deadlines. So it's a purely administrative function. We've selected a firm, and with your acquiescence and action, we would begin negotiating a detailed scope of work. Fairly limited contract in this sense. Potentially a maximum of 150,000 over the 2-year period that would be used.
Question? Yeah, Scott, I had received an email from Commerce notifying us of a reduction in our grant award recently.
Yes.
So how is this thing lining up with, I know it's not intended to be an impact on the county. It's coming through commerce funds. But when you look at you still have a budget to manage, when you look at the entirety of the budget and what you've committed to date, how does this fit into it?
We've made that adjustment, and to be clear, the reduction in the grant amount was at our request. Used, and that's because the funds that our partner communities have contributed for the climate were originally all aspects were including the reduction of greenhouse gas versions and the other parts of the climate grant. Commerce, through actually our same consultants, is doing the reduction of greenhouse gas for the entire 11 county planning area for the 26 group. And so it doesn't need to be in our scope of work anymore. So we reduced that number to get this or the other part of the number. We have factored that in, and in both. The tricky part is twofold. We have contracts between Commerce and the county, and we have a scope of work to deliver to Commerce that we've all agreed to. And then we have contracts between the county and our consultants. And those scope elements have to line up, but they're not exactly the same thing. So we've budgeted differently over here than we've got for this. So we anticipated adding this project manager from the very beginning. It wasn't an add-on. We didn't have to find or move money around to do it. But we're comfortable that with the not to exceed contracts we have in place, we have sufficient capacity to cover this.
Okay, just want to make sure because those are not intended to come out of the general fund.
That's correct.
Must be recovered through a grant. So we've got to make sure that we're managing our reimbursements according to what we've obligated.
Absolutely. And at the moment, we also have built in some capacity to make sure that supplies, expenses, anything that we need to acquire to do our public outreach, to do our parts of this, can also be reimbursed from that grant. So there's no additional, and that's somewhat trivial cost at the end of the day, but we will recover those.
So is this the same grant that we are, you just talked about public involvement and public engagement, but there was another grant that we have
There are two.
that is paying for that, helping us with our public engagement and marketing of the work.
We are spreading with a couple of exceptions. All of the communications and media public interaction are being spread across both contracts because we cover both topics. And this project manager would also be under both contracts. The one consultant for the actual update is exclusively funded under what's called the PUG, or the Periodic Update Grant. Cascadia, the climate, is funded exclusively under the climate side of it. And then Facet's work in the EIS, which is again overall for the county, that's funded out of the climate grant exclusively. So for comms and some of the broad things that cover all those topics, they'll be funded out of both grants.
Just so I can kind of put together what Scott and Scott were both saying. You're saying you got a notice that our commerce award is going down. And you're saying that was voluntary.
Yes.
Because we didn't need as much help because commerce is doing some of the modeling themselves.
Yes.
Okay, all right, you got it.
And the when they took on that assignment, they did not reduce the grant funds. They left us with our full grant funds, But since we're not going to use that, we've simply reduced the scope. And what we're doing is we've reduced that scope for fiscal 25 only. If we need to recover those are still sort of in our basket. We can bring those funds back to the table for fiscal 26 if we need.
And what is it that Commerce is doing that?
The greenhouse
us,
gas
just to
emissions
clarify that.
reduction,
Okay,
they're studying that on the broader basis and they're doing it. And I think it's important, when this was first starting, it was kind of like, well, who's doing what and how much are we doing? And is the Commerce thing going to be like an umbrella? We need to do more detailed work at the
Right.
local level. Turns out what they're doing at the broader level is covering everything we would have been doing at the local level.
okay.
So we didn't need to duplicate that effort or pay for it twice.
So how many folks responded to our request for qualifications for this project manager?
We had 3.
And were they all from Washington State?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. 1 local, 2 on the west side. And in our digital world, we looked at this and said, this can be essentially a virtual position. We don't need somebody that sits in the office every day to walk around and tap you on the shoulder and saying, are you getting your work done? We've got everything set up on a digital platform. We were very comfortable picking a qualified firm that will be operating mostly remotely.
And is this firm gonna project manage, sorry, it's a little confusing. Are they just project managing the climate piece
No.
or the entire?
Everything.
Okay. I just noticed that they kind of called that out in their cover letter, just that they have a lot of experience in the climate planning. Okay. But you're asking them, so what is their role with your team then? How do they interact with your planning team that's been
They will have
working with the community and the other jurisdictions on the update?
They will have no fewer than weekly connections with our team through our Thursday studio and keeping track of essentially who's done first, who's got the roles and responsibilities to get this done. How far did you get this week? What's to come next week? What are the upcoming deadlines? And the deadlines, action before you, before the plan commission or steering committee in some cases, those have notification deadlines, legal notices, 15 days. We have review notices, 15 days before that. So if a task is being prepared for something, keeping it on target for actual draft completion 30 or more days ahead of time is a hard thing to do when you think, oh, if I slip a day or 2, we're still plenty of time to do that. There are so many tasks involved in this plan update that if you lose track of 1 or 2 of those for even a week or 2, you can set yourself behind very, very quickly.
They look, the firm looks very experienced in working with other cities on their comp plan updates here in Washington State, so that's excellent.
And they seem to
So
have
we
good
need-
multidisciplinary control because it's, that management is certainly focused on the planning staff, but as we broaden this to public works staff, to other parts of making sure parks, they're tying themselves back into the comprehensive plan. We also need to make sure that if we're asking them for something that we're giving them, we need it by this date, we need it in this form, and that gives us a more uniform way of making that happen.
Thank you very much.
If I can claim 5 minutes.
Go for it.
Yesterday at noon, the Growth Management Hearings Board issued a decision on our final remaining case for compliance. They found in our favor. Through Jessica's magnificent arguments, her briefs, and everything else. The order explicitly says Spokane County is in compliance with the Growth Management Act. Sorry, it's been four years to get this thing put together. So for the first time in 20 years, we are in compliance.
That's good.
Very practical part of that, back to Kyle's shop and others. We can start applying for grants again, we can get ourselves back in the game. We can start having conversations about how we really need to be improving the Growth Management Act, because now we're back at the table. We're not the, outcasts sitting over them.
Great.
Well done. That was a huge lift. So great job by the team doing that. And it did. I mean, it had extended impacts, as Scott mentioned about the stormwater stuff and some of the reasons why we've had the building of some cash reserves, because we were hoping when this time came, we could start now do some matching of those dollars.
And unfortunately, our colleague is over there. She was instrumental in jumping in 2021 when we were all learning about how deep a hole we were in. We couldn't have done this better.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. Hey, Heather.
Morning.
Hello.
Have the outside agency contracts ready for execution. They have all submitted their Q4 2024 wrap-up reports. So Vanessa Behan, who's operating our children's waiting room, served 800 children in 2024, total of 1,260 hours. Highest utilizers are those people going to Superior Court, so that's good news. Youngest child was 2 weeks old. Oldest was 12, so getting a lot of uses there. Expenses in 24 were over $134,000, so we're funding them between the outside agency contract and the jury donations. They are just covering expenses. For the Northwest Museum of Arts and Culture, they're getting $25,000 again this year. Last year, we supported the Samurai Sunset Sunrise exhibit, which saw a little over 13,600 visitors, which included 18.
Samurai's this year. Expo.
Oh, that's right. Last year it was Harold.
Yeah, Harold
Yeah.
Fillets.
They saw about a little over 1,800 primary and secondary students last year, and just over 400 college students. Inland Northwest AGC. They did 7 classes last year, had a total of 93 graduates. All of those graduates had certification in OSHA 10, first aid, CPR, AED, flagging, and forklift. They were able to help some students even get their driver's license. All their participants are low income. Majority of their participants are also formerly incarcerated individuals. They have decided this year to limit their class size to 15, and a couple of class sizes in 2024 that exceeded 21. And they had some issues in transporting people to different apprenticeship centers, and just the number of people in the class, it was hard to do some of the hands-on learning. So they've decided in 2025, they'll limit their class sizes to 15. But each quarter, with the exception of Q1 in 24, they did at least 2 classes. So that was good news. And Chase Youth Commission is continuing their work. And they said in their Q4 report, they have now paired all their youth commission representatives with either a city council person or a county commissioner. So these contracts will be before you next week for execution.
Any questions?
And this is all reflecting what was decided through the process.
Correct.
Implementing it all and getting report.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. That date here is. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, that brings us to miscellaneous, city miscellaneous items.
I've got one quick one, just a big nudge to the commissioners. We've got 10. Gina told me you have 10 board and commission appointments that are needing some signatures.
That folder's getting thick out
Yes.
there.
And they're a variety. They are anywhere from the accessible community advisory, facility district, disabled, development disabled, HGs, you know, there's a variety of them, so if you could.
Message received.
We'll check. Matt, you got anything for us?
Good morning, commissioners. I just wanted to give a brief update on some of the media coverage stemming from last week's announcement around STARS. So we were successful in getting coverage on 2, 4, and 6, and 28, and a paper story. We did have to come in with just a couple of corrections and tighten a few things up. But I think that was more on the other end than ours. So last night's interview looked good on KHQ. Justin was interviewed for KXLY. Doesn't look like they used much of that, but they did get up to the facility. And so most all the coverage, if you haven't seen it, just emphasized what the community is getting from these investments, which I thought was a good frame. Last night's story, it was more to do with the overall opioid settlement funds that are coming in and how commissioners are choosing to allocate those. So that was a good story as well. I do anticipate there'll be some media coverage next week, just looking ahead at some of the potential agenda items. So I'll touch base with you all on that early in the week. We did have the KSPS interview with Luke Jasmine, and so that'll be coming up. I have that back and we'll get it uploaded and ready. It'll run the third Saturday of the month. And I think next month up on KSPS Spotlight is Commissioner CUNY, and she's going to be focused on baseball. So in the stadium. And so some of the new additions there. So that should be a fun one as we get ready for spring season.
I let her have it.
Oh, gosh. I
There's a
can't
little
believe that.
Rochambeau in that.
But it sounds like I can't wait to go out and tour it myself. My daughter's gonna work there again this summer, and today she said she has her training. She goes, yeah, they're gonna give us a tour of all the new facilities. I'm like, oh, cool. So it's really exciting to see everything finally coming to fruition.
Yes. Yes. So look forward to that. And then we'll get in touch with the commissioner who's going to be on deck for May for Spotlight. We do have a number of proclamations coming up. I just wanted to briefly review those with you, make sure we're not missing anything. Martha Lou is still remote for a few more weeks, but we should start seeing her back on campus sometime in the April timeframe. So just to update on her, she's helping manage these resolutions. So public health week, that's something that we need to take up in early April. We have a draft. We can get that to you. Mental health awareness month is slated for early May, like May 1st, because it covers the whole month. We've in the past done corrections officers, and so Martha Lou will be in touch with Sparber and Hooper on that. There's also National Police Week, which is May 11th through 17th. We've done that one sometimes alternating years if we catch it. And then Public Works Week is also in May. So Public Works Week will be something we'll get in touch with Kyle Shop. I think we've also kind of alternated on that one. Some years we grab it and do it, and some years there's just posters that go up around campus. So look for those. If there's no other proclamations. Yes.
So Martha Lou reached out about the public health week that we talked about last week. So I couldn't remember because it was the three of us that were discussing it. And we chose to do it the week before spring break, so like the April 1st, that's right, April
Yes.
Fool's Day.
Yes.
So is that one that I'm happy to present it, but I didn't know if anybody else, she was asking.
Whoever wants to read it can read it.
All right, put me down.
Good.
She was just checking in. She's working ahead.
Yes.
Traditionally, the vice chair reads them unless someone else wants to, and then we just let it.
Okay.
So, yeah. If you want to read it, you get to read it.
Since I'm chair of the health district this year, I think it'd be fun to do that, so.
You got it.
All right, just want
We're
to make
not gonna
sure.
fight you for it.
Okay, well, I just wanted to make sure.
So good of you,
There's head
Mr. Vice
nods.
Chair. So gracious.
We
Sounds
would
like we're
alwa-
gonna have a
but
lot.
We'd
We're gonna
always
have a lot.
make Al read the one when it was like the recognize the older Americans month. And he would always like say something before he start, and so then we felt, cause like, and like Mary and I would be like trying to hold back laughing, cause he would always like, before he turned his microphone on, he'd crack a joke about it to us. Oh, yeah.
One thing I wanted to let you know about the proclamation. So we do the photos, obviously we do the ceremonial presentation, and those always go on our social media. For commissioners who are reading them, now with Charissa on board, she can clip that out if you'd like that. Just a little video clip for your social media or newsletters if you're doing them. And then Charissa also has a little bit of bandwidth to do, like, if every commissioner every month or every other month would like to record a video or have just those assets available to them. It's always dependent on bandwidth. If there's something else going on that the whole board is doing together, that takes priority. But I know a couple of commissioners are using that, so.
Doing a great job, so.
Yes, we're very happy to have her.
Yeah.
She's also followed up on your request from late summer, fall to order a movable podium, a lightweight podium. So we have that now for if you're doing a district-based event. So we'll get with your execs on how they can check that out. We also have a rollable, she ordered a rollable AV system, so mic and speaker. So if you were having something individually, but it'll also be mainly available for the board to use if we do something out in the courtyard or some kind of outdoor lightweight press conference type thing. We can have both of those available. And we did also locate the step and repeat banner. So when we're doing countywide events, it's the blue logos. You can see it on last night's KHQ piece.
Where was it?
It was next to Shelley's desk.
Oh.
And what's this we located it?
Yeah, we located it. The royal we.
Who put it there?
Team
Team real quest.
I think Jessica put it there before she left, so. For safekeeping.
I wonder
It
if
was very
Ron-
safe.
Ron might have been trying to stash things.
No, I look forward for a good
I have no proof.
hour one day.
I walked through the door yesterday, Pat was at the front desk, and I like turned to talk to, and then I see in the distance, I'm like, that's the backdrop. It's like, what, right there. It's like, it was literally just sitting right there against the wall.
In all fairness, it had like a crock pot on top of it.
Oh.
It was obvious that it was some
Like a-
furniture.
There was like a small bowl sitting on. It was
You can
very
see through the
visible. All we had to do was open our eyes and look for it.
All right, so we've got all of our materials now.
Yes,
Awesome.
yes. Anything else for me? Any questions?
No, I just want to say, good, well done on buying our own podium and like little AV system, because I would assume with rental rates, we're gonna more than recoup the cost on that pretty quickly.
Yes.
Every single time we hold an event, renting a podium and a microphone, speaker, I mean, yeah, those are gonna pay for themselves.
It was a
Very
very,
short
it was a
order.
very modest investment, so.
So, good move on that.
So you should see those at some of the park groundbreakings, because those are the easier ones, the chairs and other tables and stuff. Unless the department has them, we may need to still rent those. But unless it's a big canopied event, there shouldn't be a ton of extra cost or there's gonna be a bunch of media and we need a professional sound system. But when we're just doing kind of smaller celebration type events, these will come in handy.
It did come out of your budget, your travel budget, commissioners. We thank you for that.
Understood. Hey, I'm here to help.
Since it's a traveling podium.
I know we have an old podium that maybe isn't in the best shape. I know it has the county logo mounted to the front. You want to remove that, mount it to the new one?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's over in the HR Collaboration Center, I think.
Okay. Yeah, I was just gonna say, I mean, it's been years, I think, since we've used that one, so you might as well reuse the
And that one's-
nice circular logo.
That
that's
one's
there.
super heavy and mostly stationary now in there. It's got something that plugs into the wall that's incorporated in it. Like a little speaker. Those are the big things. Obviously getting a power source. We have a battery that can go with it too, so. And then the last thing I was gonna mention with the GSI fly-in, I can get with Jeff, but if there's any kind of leave behind materials like we did for your Olympia fly-ins that you would like us to get working on, we have a couple of weeks heads up. So most of that is, quick 15-minute meetings with members or their staff. But for the bigger projects like the stabilization center, I know we already have something together for that.
We have a federal.
Those were good. Over to Olympia, lots of handouts to leave
good.
with budget chairs and other people, so thanks for that.
Or like, having it as an email follow-up PDF after you've met with somebody, it's very handy.
And all
Little
branded.
Reminder.
Yes. County logo on it, all branded.
Very pretty.
That's it for me. Yeah. Any other miscellaneous? I had a quick one. It was just Alicia and Joey mentioned something and it kind of popped into my head. I mean to put you on the spot, Commissioner Jordan. Do you have an update? They mentioned Launch Northwest. So I know you and Commissioner CUNY are on that committee. What is the latest with Launch Northwest?
I
I don't really know what they're
missed
up
the
to.
Last meeting,
Okay,
so I can kind of check in and get back to you. It's just been a little bit since the last meeting. I mean, they had the Empower Mentoring Program. They had staff kind of go into the schools to try and connect students with, I think they call it Real Life Spokane. So it was trying to connect students with after-school programs and have one kind of systematic way for that to be done across the school. So I can get you more specific. update,
Okay.
though.
yeah, I mean, I've heard bits and pieces. I mean, when they launched Northwest, I mean, they got a lot of media attention. I mean, you heard about it everywhere you went. And I know they're still out there. I know they're doing stuff, but I haven't really
There's
heard
been
exactly
a
what they
scholarship program too. So I think right now
Okay.
it's kind of scholarships, kind of a awareness campaign around FAFSA completion.
Okay.
And then the mentoring program and the connection with after school activities. So it's kind of a multi-part, and those
Okay.
are all kind of in effect.
Okay.
I think there's another project they funded related to kind of piggybacking off of the child youth well-being program that we have here. So there's a bunch of pieces that are moving in a good space, a good direction.
Okay.
But I can get with the chair and kind of bring a more detailed update.
Okay.
But there's good work happening.
Okay. And that may be something, maybe in the future, we may want to have them in.
Yeah.
Present
I
it
think that's a great idea.
and see
There's
how
moments, yeah.
how the ARP dollars that we dedicated, how those are, or you know, what portions or what
Yeah.
parts of their system those are going to.
Yeah, and I know that last year when we were dealing with the timeframes of ARPA, there was a lot of push to get deliverables moving and projects moving, and I think they made a lot of progress last year. So it's probably a good time for them to come to the board and give us an update. And I think you'll like what they're doing. I just missed the last meeting, so if there's anything that's more recent than what I described, I'll need to get updated on.
Sounds good.
Yeah, it would be great to know how they're tracking like FAFSA completion rates, over the last year. Have they increased? I know there's a lot of partnerships with credit unions and banks, right, to help have nights where families can go in, just providing financial folks to help them fill out the FAFSA and answer questions. And I'm hearing about those popping up all over the county. And then the other thing I learned, see all these little pieces, right? So it'd be nice to get the full picture. Is I happened to meet with Joe Ader from Family Promise, and they received a pot of funding to help keep families housed out in the valley districts. So when a family or a teen is struggling with their housing stability, they wrap around and they have a dedicated person working with landlords and working with folks to keep people housed, kind of the model that Catholic Charities was doing in some of the Spokane schools and Deer Park.
What was the source of those funds?
I think it's city and county ARPA money, but I don't know. I don't know. It could be matching private funds. I don't know. There's a lot of funds involved, but I've heard that it's been super successful and they've been able to keep a lot of families in the CB district housed, and that helps that student then not get displaced and they can stay on track with their post-secondary goals. Which was one of my concerns with Launch Northwest. Like, you can put a lot of money into, when they were first putting together the plans, you can put a lot of money into scholarships, but if there's struggles with that student graduating ready to take advantage.
The program has definitely evolved from the beginning of Launch Northwest, because I think when they first approached us, it feels like years and years ago. I mean, at this time, it feels quite a while ago. It was all centered around a scholarship program that regardless of what school you graduate from, it's like you go out, you get whatever funding or scholarships you can get, and then whatever that delta was, Launch Northwest would cover the cost, and that was sort of the centerpiece, but they've kind of moved away from that, haven't they? That's, or it's at least not the main mission of the group, correct?
Well, I would say it's a significant focus, but
Okay.
they're thinking about how do you build the pipeline all the way up to that scholarship
Okay.
piece, right? So the mentoring and the after-school activities and those types of earlier intervention is about trying to set up kids to be in a position to fill out the FAFSA and
Okay.
apply for those trade schools or college opportunities. So they're thinking about it with that as a significant focus, but how do you get the pipeline of opportunity strong all the way to that point?
Okay.
If that makes sense.
So mental health work, just making sure there's not barriers to that student being able to actually get into a program. So, yeah.
So I think it's still a significant focus, but it's maybe an expanded way of thinking about how do we move the needle on that?
But I think it would be good to get an update.
Yeah. I'd be happy to work with the chair on that.
Sounds good. Anything else? Nope. Matt, no one's suing us?
We've got maybe 5 executive session items
Oh,
stacking
no.
up for later. Maybe that's down to 2, we'll see. 2 to 5 range this
Okay.
the
This afternoon?
board,
After you took off?
if the full board's here.
Sounds good.
Need all the board members.
Okay. I know Commissioner Keeney will be virtual. I assume Commissioner French is gonna be in person, but we'll see.
Do we have any sense of the time frame on those? Just a guess at this point,
15 minutes each.
up to 5, at least 2.
There would be, we've got 3. And I would say 15, and then 1 closed session, 15 for each. 1 closed session for 10 or 15. So, an hour.
Are we pension services presentation, is that this afternoon as well?
Nope, that's gonna be next week. Yeah, next Monday. So we schedule that one.
That sounds like
Love a packed Monday again.
3 + 1. Finally.
Sounds good.
15 minutes each.
Okay. Shorter if we ask not as many questions.
Well, that just depends on the briefing, right?
I know, I
Has that been
know.
informed?
Just know, the fewer questions, the quicker we get through it. We are in charge of our own destiny in that room. Just know that. Okay. Anything else around the room? Nobody? No, okay. All right, well then it is 10:56. And we will adjourn for the morning and we'll reconvene at 2 o'clock for our consent agenda. See everybody then.